We've all had our share of bad dates, whether it's the conversation we can't seem to follow or the breath we just can't stand. It's happened to all of us, but for the women featured on Netflix's new documentary, The Tinder Swindler, the bar for a bad date might be a tad bit higher. The one-off film, released on February 2nd, follows the story of a con man who swindled money from his victims after meeting them through dating apps, and has since gained immense popularity online. Let's dive in and see what all the fuss is about. So who is the Tinder Swindler? Shimon Hayut, the so-called Tinder Swindler, was born in Israel in 1990. According to several reports, our guy has been involved in various minor cons, such as check fraud, since his teenage years. Quite foreshadowing, Hayut would travel across Europe, assuming different identities, and be active on dating apps such as Tinder. He would show off his lavish lifestyle, funded by his victims' money, and lure women into romantic relationships with him. According to the Times of Israel, he defrauded about $10 million from his victims in different parts of Europe during 2017 and 2019 alone. In 2015, Hayut was convicted of fraud in Finland and was sentenced to 3 years in prison. He finished his sentence early and came back to Israel. He took up the name Simon Leviev, posing as the son of Israeli diamond tycoon Lev Leviev. His stay was not long, as he fled the country again in 2017, only to start his swindling spree across the European continent. In the next 2 years, Hayut would assume various identities and would go on to defraud many unassuming women while posing as a handsome, rich playboy looking for love. What was his modus operandi? Leviev was seen to have developed a particular pattern. He would always be active on Tinder, waiting to get a match. He would then take the woman on an extravagant and highly impressive date involving expensive cars, luxury hotels, and even private jets. As in the case of Cecilie Fjellhoy, one of the women featured in the documentary. He would then gradually build their relationship to earn the trust of the victims, sometimes presenting them with posh gifts and dinner dates. But secretly, he would be talking to several other women on the side, while claiming to be head over heels in love with the victim. According to his victims, after he had successfully gained their trust, he would reveal that he's been hunted by some of his enemies who happen to be quite nearby. He would show them fake messages and an image of his bleeding bodyguard who had apparently been hurt by these so-called enemies. Worried and confused, the victims would not know how to react. At this point, he would claim that he couldn't use his own credit card because of obvious security concerns. Therefore, he needed his girlfriend to open a new one for him to use under her own name. Generally, he would try to con many women at the same time, asking them for loans and financial aid, which he promised to repay. Once he had the money, he would flee the scene, leaving his victims to bear the consequences of his financial fraud. He would then go on to use the swindled money to lure in new victims, generally in a different country. He would avoid any repayment by threatening and stalling his victims, and would later forge bank transfers to avoid being caught. How did they catch him? After successfully evading any type of consequences for his actions for almost 2 years, his criminal activity started to gain prominence due to a piece published in the Norwegian tabloid Verdens Gang. The article, aptly named The Tinder Swindler, gained a lot of traction and traced his location to be at a high-end motel in Munich. After the article went viral, Leviev decided to go underground, and his swindling endeavors had to take a pause. In the given circumstances, he had no choice but return to his long-term girlfriend, Aileen Coleman, who, to his ill knowledge, had already been exposed to the VG publication. Aileen knew what he was up to and played along with him. She even convinced him to sell many of his designer clothes to make some quick money for the time being, keeping the money with her, hence swindling the swindler himself. How's that for karma? After some detective work, she found out that Leviev was planning to flee to Greece, so she gave his flight information to law enforcement. Consequently, he was arrested in Greece by Interpol in 2019 while carrying a fake passport. In the same year, he was sentenced to 15 months in an Israeli prison, but came out after serving only 5 due to the COVID pandemic. Apparently, the prison time hasn't really served him well. The Times of Israel reported that in 2020, he faked being a medical worker to get an early dosage of the vaccine. Some people never learn their lesson, do they? Besides this, he's still wanted for various offenses of fraud and forgery in Sweden, Norway, and the United Kingdom. Let's take a look at the documentary release. With so much drama, betrayal, and suspense, you'd wonder, why wasn't Leviev's story turned into a Netflix adaptation earlier on? Better late than never. Earlier this month, Netflix released a documentary of the same name as the VG article based on the life and crimes of the convicted con man. The documentary takes its theme and idea from the same article that led to the arrest of the swindler. The film features the stories of 3 of his victims, who later teamed up to get their revenge on him. Each woman narrates her own experiences with the man and how they ultimately worked together to get their well-deserved payback. So far, the film has been a hit. It is the first documentary to lead Netflix's weekly film chart. It has been received well by viewers and critics alike, clocking 45.8 million viewing hours worldwide died within the first week of its release. Now, we have Tinder's statement. A day before the release of the documentary, Tinder posted new guidelines for its users on how to avoid romance scams online, without any reference to the Netflix film. But 3 days after the release of the documentary, it was confirmed by a Tinder spokesman that they had banned Leviev from the site. They added that the dating site has done additional internal investigations and can confirm that the swindler is not active on the site with any of his aliases. He's also been banned from other dating sites and apps, including Match.com, Plenty of Fish, and OkCupid. What happened to the victims? The 3 victims of Shimon's Ponzi scheme featured in the documentary, namely Cecily Felhoy, Pernia Soholm, and Aileen Charlotte, were defrauded of $250,000, $33,000, and $139,000 respectively. According to several media outlets, they're reportedly still paying off the debts incurred to them during their time with Leviev. Recently, they've started a GoFundMe campaign to recover the stolen money and pay off any debts that they will still owe. Now, let's look into Leviev's reaction to the documentary. After all the hype around the documentary and the case in general, what does our convicted con man have to say about all this? Days after the release of the film, he issued a statement on his official Instagram account saying that he will share his side of the story in days to come. Well, that is as soon as he sorted out the best and most respectful way to convey it to his audience and all the parties involved. Must be some statement. He deleted his account afterward. However, he created a new Instagram account on the 9th of February. Addressing his victim's GoFundMe page, he suggested people help legitimate associations, implying the page to be a sham, also labeling the women to be manipulators. He has always denied being a fraud and has criticized his victims in earlier statements. Leviev gave out another statement calling out the women he scammed and referred to them as liars who should be telling the truth. How prevalent dating fraud really is. Besides the whole situation described in the Netflix documentary, how common do you think romance scams really are? Well, the numbers don't look good, to say the least. The Federal Trade Commission reported that online dating apps are a prime hunting ground for scammers. According to federal data, these grifters bilked people out of a whopping $547 million combined. Imagine that. But it doesn't stop here. In the last 5 years, people have been reported to have lost a total of $1.3 billion to online romance scammers. This sum exceeds any other FTC fraud category. So how do they do it? Well, the answer is simpler than you would expect. According to the FTC, these scammers disguise themselves using fake profiles with appealing photographs, usually taken from the web. Sometimes they stalk their targets beforehand and pretend to have common interests as they appeal to them emotionally. The only logical way to prevent such fraud is to stay away from them. Double-check the information anyone gives you about themselves, and never make online money transfers for someone you don't clearly know. And that's a wrap for this video. Do you think the Tinder swindler got what he deserved, or should he still be held accountable for his behavior? Let us know in the comments below. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. See you in the next one.